As a freelance journalist, I have had my share of interesting assignments over the years, but nothing could have prepared me for the experience I had in a small village nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. The assignment was straightforward, to write about the town's rich history and culture. But things took a turn for the worse when I met an elderly man named Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson was a grizzled old man with a stern look on his face and a suspicious demeanor. He warned me not to venture into a particular room in the old town hall, claiming it was cursed. At first, I dismissed it as local folklore and paid no attention to his warning. But as the days went by, I found myself thinking about the forbidden room more and more. The curiosity soon took over, and I found myself drawn to the room. It was like an irresistible force was pulling me in. I tried to resist, but the temptation was too strong. I decided to sneak into the room one night and take a look around. I entered the room, and as soon as I did, the door slammed shut behind me. The room was cold, and a musty smell filled my nostrils. Suddenly, I heard strange noises coming from the walls. The sounds were like whispers, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I tried to leave the room, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and I frantically searched for a way out. That was when I noticed strange markings on the walls. They looked like ancient symbols, and they seemed to glow in the dark. As I examined the markings, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle I had brought with me. The room was plunged into total darkness, and the whispers grew louder. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see a ghostly figure staring back at me. I screamed and closed my eyes, hoping it was all a bad dream. But when I opened them again, I saw the ghostly figure was gone, and the markings on the walls had disappeared. The door opened with ease, and I ran out of the room as fast as I could. The next day, I went to speak to Mr. Jackson, hoping to get some answers. He was sitting on his porch, rocking back and forth in his chair. When I approached him, he didn't seem surprised to see me.
"Did you find what you were looking for?"
he asked. I hesitated for a moment before replying, "I don't know what I found, but it scared me to my core." Mr. Jackson nodded his head slowly.
"You shouldn't have gone into that room. It's cursed, you know."
I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and muttered something about the past being better left alone. I left his porch feeling more confused than ever. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that something was watching me. I would hear strange noises coming from the walls, and sometimes I would catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. I knew I had to get to the bottom of what was happening, so I decided to do some research on the history of the town. I spent hours poring over old documents and talking to locals, but I couldn't find anything that explained the strange occurrences. One night, I decided to return to the forbidden room, armed with a camera and a recording device. I wanted to document everything that happened and try to get to the bottom of the mystery. As soon as I entered the room, I could feel that something was different. The room was colder than any other room I had ever been in, and the air seemed to be thick with some kind of presence. The feeling of unease crept up my spine, but I tried to ignore it and focused on my mission to uncover the town's secrets. The room was small and cramped, with barely enough space to move around. The walls were bare, with no windows or doors, except for the one I had entered through. The only thing in the room was a wooden chest in the corner, covered in cobwebs. I approached the chest and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I tried again, with more force, and finally, the lid creaked open. Inside, I found a leather-bound book with strange symbols etched on the cover. Without thinking, I flipped through the pages, and my eyes widened as I read the words on the page. It was a diary of sorts, detailing the events of the town's dark past. As I read, the whispers in the room grew louder, and the temperature dropped even lower. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see the ghostly figure once again. This time, it spoke to me, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from beyond the grave.
"Leave this place,"
the ghostly figure said.
"You have no business here."
I tried to run, but the door was locked, and the ghostly figure disappeared into thin air. The markings on the walls began to glow once again, and the room was filled with an eerie light. I was trapped, and I knew I was in danger. I tried to reason with the ghostly figure, but it was no use. It seemed determined to keep me there, trapped in the forbidden room. As the hours passed, I began to feel a strange sensation in my body, like something was trying to take over. It was as if the room was trying to possess me, and I knew I had to get out before it was too late. I searched the room for any means of escape, but there was none. The ghostly figure appeared once again, and this time, it was angry.
You have disturbed the peace of this place. You must pay the price.
With a sudden jolt, I was thrown to the ground and everything went black. When I woke up, I felt groggy and disoriented. I struggled to sit up, and as I did, I noticed something strange. My skin felt rough and scaly, and my eyesight seemed sharper than usual. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was just a result of the fall. But as I looked around, I realized that something was different. The world seemed more vivid, more alive. The colors were brighter, and the sounds were clearer. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the distant hum of cars. As I tried to stand up, I noticed that my hands had transformed too. They were no longer human hands, but something else entirely. They were covered in scales, with sharp claws at the end of each finger. I recoiled in horror, not knowing what to make of this sudden transformation. A moment later, the pain set in. It was a searing pain, like my body was being torn apart from the inside out. I screamed, hoping that someone would hear me, but the pain was too much to bear. I collapsed on the ground, writhing in agony. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure was approaching me, and as it got closer I realized that it was Mr. Jackson. He had a knowing look in his eyes, as if he had expected this to happen.
You should have listened to my warning,
He said in a raspy voice.
The forbidden room is cursed, and now you're cursed too.
I tried to protest, to ask him how to reverse the curse, but he was already walking away. I was left alone, lying on the ground, with nothing but my newfound pain and the knowledge that I had made a grave mistake. From that day on, I was never the same. I became a recluse, too afraid to show my new form to the world. I spent my days locked in my house, trying to find a way to reverse the curse. But it was no use. The town's secrets had claimed another victim, and I was left to suffer the consequences. The forbidden room had changed me, and I knew that I would never be able to undo what had been done.